The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices convened a virtual meeting Tuesday to vote on a proposal that would give priority to healthcare workers and patients in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. The two groups together represent about 23 million Americans out of a population of about 330 million. Terrorists are responsible for an entire Indonesian village of vacant homes. AFN's Charlie Butts has the story.
On November 27th, members of the Eastern Indonesia Mujahideen, who pledge allegiance to ISIS, swarmed into a village in central Sulawesi for the sole purpose of causing violence. Gina Go of International Christian Concern has talked with local officials.
They allegedly attacked the Salvation Army service post in that area, along with several houses. They actually set them on fire, and they killed 4 Christians in the area.
The group fled, and Indonesian forces are trying to locate them, but that's difficult because forests provide a ready-made escape route. Go tells AFN very soon after the attack began, every home was vacant.
After seeing the horror that was before their eyes, where someone was hacked to death and someone was decapitated, about 750 in the village and around the village, they ran to somewhere near, and they don't plan to return because of the danger that's still present over there.
They are farmers and have asked for help by providing land they can farm, but there is local resistance, and aid by the national government is limited. Although the government claims the attack was not motivated by religion, the terrorists are Muslim and the victims all Christians. I'm Charlie Butts.
Investors seem to think there is still a chance that a COVID relief package can be cobbled together. Both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 set record closes on Tuesday. The Dow fared pretty good as well, ending the day 185 points in the green. The NASDAQ gained 156, and the S&P 500 gave investors 40 3/4 points. Find more news and information online. Our web address is onenewsnow.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and the One News Now mobile app. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordan.
The loss of a child through an abortion affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming, but there is hope and healing in the aftermath. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who's been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. I think you want to stick around for this one. I think you do. My name is Abraham Hamilton III. I am your host, joined by the full squad. Mr. Jeff Reed's on my left. Mr. Marty Sparks is to my right. Mr. Rob Gardner is in the screening room. Rob, somebody said Rob is on his Harley. Now Rob is here. We got the whole squad in the building today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the program. Right now, many of you are making that transition from part-time work, your part-time jobs, to your full-time jobs. And I'm going to tell you, I make no bones about recognizing that the first institution that God created was the family. The first command that God uttered to mankind was uttered within the context of the family. I am not tepid or hesitant in conveying the importance and the significance that not that I place on the family, but that God places on the family. I say it repeatedly, that we in our nation, in the United States of America, and I would argue that this is probably true in many of the nations of the world, but it's particularly in our country, we are reeling from a phenomenon. You want to talk about systematic or systemic phenomena. We are reeling from the systemic nature of neglecting the home. Many of us place import and priority on everything else. to the neglect of our home. And my hope by offering this admonition on a daily basis is to simply encourage you to evaluate yourself to see whether or not, I may be doing that. I get messages from time to time, mostly from men, saying, Abe, you know, man, I realize, man, I hear you talking about going to your full-time job. I realize that I've been putting my job over my family. I realize I've been putting this over my family. I've been putting that over my family. And listen, this isn't rocket science. It's simply seeing what the Word of God says, but you know that Jesus himself taught. You want to spoil a house? What do you have to do? Bind the strong man. Once the strong man is bound, then guess what happens? The wolves have access. So I am encouraging you in this way to be to counteract the phenomenon in our society that if you look at the things around us, everything pushes on us to make priorities of everything except our families. You know, when was the last time you saw a television commercial where you had a husband and a wife with their children depicted in the television commercial, and it actually celebrated a father humbly, lovingly leading his family? When was the last time you've seen that? And these are tacit things that happen all around us. And what begins to happen is that we normalize neglecting our homes. Some people don't even realize it, you know. And so you have guys, sometimes, not always, but sometimes you're like, man, only times I am esteemed is outside of my home. The same thing happens with wives. There's a push in our society to lionize a woman doing anything and everything except being a mother and a wife. Everything else, I mean, you want to be a CEO of Pepsi, you want to kick off for the Vanderbilt University football team. Here, woman, let her roar. But you want to serve the Lord through serving your family. Oh, you're a retrograde. You're a throwback. This isn't the 1950s. Brothers and sisters, listen. It's not rocket science. The scripture lays it out firstly. And the reality is that there are wicked people who understand it as well, which is why they want to work so hard to get access to your home for themselves. So they want to turn you away from your home while they say, okay, we'll take it from here. Let's reverse that within the family of God, brothers and sisters. Jesus, in explaining the outflow of the Great Commission, he said, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and the uttermost parts of the world. Simply put, the Lord doesn't want us neglecting Jerusalem to win the world. Nor does he want us neglecting the world to win Jerusalem. But the Lord understands context, and we should work from the spheres of influences immediately, batten down the hatches there, and work from there. So I want to encourage you to worship the Lord through serving him in your full-time job. Amen. Joshua chapter 24 is where I'm going to go today. Joshua chapter 24, just two verses, verses 14 and 15. But the context for the verses truly bring significance to this understanding. So the most popular verse is verse 15, choose you this day who you will serve. But if you study this book, and this is toward the latter part of Joshua's life, Joshua died at age 110. He was the successor to Moses. In Joshua 23, here you have, after all of the conquest, which began with Joshua winning the battle of Jericho and then proceeding all throughout Canaan. Then at the latter part of Joshua's life, guess what he still had to confront? The propensity towards idolatry amongst the Israelites. The entire chapter of 23, Joshua summons the leaders of the tribes of Israel. In fact, I'll just read it specifically. Verse 1 in chapter 23 says, a long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their surrounding enemies, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, its elders and heads, its judges and officers, and provided a discourse to them. What he did in that chapter, he ran down a bit of Israel's history and said, listen, guys, y'all have to remain faithful to the Lord. This flirtation, I'm paraphrasing, this flirtation with idolatry has got to stop. Then chapter 24 begins. Joshua now summons all of Israel, in addition to the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers. And he goes once again through Israel's history, reminding them of God's faithfulness. Didn't the Lord promise us that he would carry us into this promised land? And look what has all happened. Look what's happened all around us. And so that is the context and the backdrop from which we get verse 14. And in verse 14, it says this: now, therefore, when you see therefore, what is it there for? The therefore is in light of everything I just said before, in light of Joshua's discourse about God's faithfulness to Israel. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Some transliterations say, and truth. They both capture the communication of the Hebrew text there. Serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Look at the next phrase. Put away the gods, lowercase g, that your father served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now you have to understand, and I know I normally read it all and then dig into it, but I'm just digging into it now today. You have to understand Joshua's reference to the gods that your father served beyond the river. He's talking about the Jordan River. And then he adds to that, and in Egypt. Now, I know, and I agree with you. My heart rejoices when you get to verse 15, when Joshua talks about choose ye this day. But isn't it amazing that Joshua still had to highlight the fact, listen, I don't want y'all to think I don't know, that before crossing over the Jordan River, I know some of y'all were flirting with the gods of the Amorites and the Canaanites. Do we have to even revisit the idolatry and the covetousness that was displayed at Ai following the victory at Jericho? And Joshua literally saying, put away the gods that your father served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, so some translations say, if it is disagreeable in your sight, if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, then choose this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods your father served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Brothers and sisters, I want to challenge you in this way. Has God not revealed himself sufficiently to you to now conclude whether or not you are going to serve him? Why continue to halt between two opinions? Why continue to profess to be a Christ follower, but yet live with the flirtations to where you allow yourself to be boxed in to live according to the former nature? Choose this day whom you will serve. And one of the fundamental components that follows a resolute commitment to serve the Lord, Proverbs 28:1 says it best. The wicked flee when no one pursues. The wicked flee when no one pursues. You want to know what that looks like? You driving on the interstate, you speeding, you know you're speeding. You see something that looks like a cop car, a police car, your heart starts beating. Now, you don't even see any lights, you don't know if anybody's coming after you, but you have that trepidation. Why? Because you know you're out of sorts. But the proverb writer contrasted that the wicked flee when no one pursues. But in contrast, the righteous are as bold as lions. Boldness follows a commitment to follow the Lord. And in many places in our country today, what we are witnessing is a crisis in courage. That's what it boils down to. A crisis of courage. To where we are more concerned with the opinions of men, more concerned with the perception of men than we are in God's perception of us. And I'm simply saying, and I don't want to yell and scream, I simply want to say, choose you this day who you're going to serve. Because if you haven't noticed yet, things are not lightening up around us. If you haven't noticed it yet, things are tightening up. You know, for so long, we've enjoyed unfettered freedoms in this country. You know, we've marveled at how in some places, I never forget in my church in New Orleans growing up, there was an evangelist, a full-time missionary, that we supported in China. And he would tell stories how in some places in China, they couldn't tell in advance where the church was going to meet because they found that the Chinese Communist government had inserted spies amongst their churches. And if they sent out the location too soon, when they tried to gather to meet, they would meet the Chinese Communist police. And so sometimes they would have to just pray. And then they would all show up together at the same place to meet as a church. We often marvel at those kind of stories. If you haven't noticed it yet, these times are approaching us here in America. The Lord has been stirring me in our own local assembly to fortify the bride of Christ to thrive in the face of overt persecution. Brothers and sisters, we will not be able to stand if we do not have a resolute commitment. And so I want to echo the admonition that Joshua offered prior to his expiration to the Israelites. It's like, man, I know that as we've been going through all of these things, there's some of us, some among you who have been flirting with, entertaining these lowercase gods that are no gods at all. And I'm saying, choose you this day who you will serve. We're at the time where it's put up or shut up time. You know, growing up on the block, we say, don't talk about it, be about it. You know, we knew the people, man, I'm not encouraging fighting. These are just the stories I have. You knew the people who couldn't fight on the street, on the block, because they were the ones that wanted to talk all the time. The ones who really could throw them things, as we said. They didn't have much to talk about. It's either we're going to do this or not. Now, I'm not encouraging fighting. Parents, I'm not encouraging that. But what I am encouraging is that it's put up or shut up time. It's time to be the church. You know, I say often, and I say it on this program too, you hear me say it, that when you see Christ as he is to be seen, high and exalted, you transition from giving offerings to becoming the offering. You become the offering. It is high time for those of us who've been purchased by the shed blood of Jesus Christ, where we live like him, because we see him as he is rightly to be seen.
Here's a great thing to consider doing right now before the end of the year. Call Medishare and find out just how much you would save by switching to Medishare, the affordable alternative to health insurance. When you call, you'll get some good news and probably be very happily surprised too. The typical family saves $500 a month, but you might save even more. It's so worth it to at least find out. And you'll see why more than 400,000 people are already members. Medishare is a Christian community that's shared more than $4 billion in each other's healthcare costs. It really is remarkable, and they're very easy to talk to. And here's the thing. If you join before the end of the year, they'll waive your new member fee. That's another $170 you'll save. I'll give you the number here in a second. The call, and you'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is December 31st, so call now. You'll save even more. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. If you belong to Jesus, then whether you realize it or not, your life today is a living testimony to the power of the gospel. The Apostle Paul knew this well. In his letter to the believers at Philippi, he wrote, "Join in imitating me, and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us." Now, that might sound like bragging coming from someone else, but Paul was not a show-off. He knew the power of a testimony, and as a Christian, your life is a testimony too. What do you think it tells others about Jesus? The only way to become like Jesus is to spend time with him, and Anchor Devotional can help. Get started now at getanchor.com.
Brian Fisher here with the Life and Liberty Minute. Phil Waldron, a former combat officer with a specialty in electronic warfare, gave sworn testimony last week before the Pennsylvania State Senate. He flagged a spectacular spike anomaly in one batch of 600,000 ballots in which 570,000 votes went for Joe Biden and just 3,200 went for Donald Trump. These votes were processed in a time period that is not mechanically possible. So in this one batch, 99.4% of the recorded votes went for the former vice president, enough to flip the state for him. If justice is done, the election will be thrown into the House of Representatives on December 14, where Trump will almost certainly win. May God reveal everything that has been hidden in darkness, and may justice be done.
Catch Brian Fisher on Focal Point, weekday afternoons at 105 Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. I want to urge you to stick around because I am going to play some audio today. Now let's just face it, you probably won't you won't hear it in too many other places, but let's dig into this, shall we? And I guess let me start off here. You guys know, and I've said on this program, I am not one of these people who my hope is anchored in the ultimate results as confirmed by the Electoral College vote on December 14th as to who will be the next president of the United States. It's not. However, as an American citizen and as a Christian, first of all, I'm a lover of truth. And second of all, I appreciate the nation that God has blessed me to be born in. And if there is any evidence of fraudulent activities in the fundamental franchise of being a citizen in the constitutional republic known as the United States of America, then we should all, no matter what your political persuasion may be, want it discovered. Those who are in favor of, who want Joe Biden to be the 46th president of the United States, they should also want whatever evidence of irregularities to be revealed, if there's any evidence, because you want to be able to stand firm and say, hey, I'm confident that the American people voted for the president of my choice. All right. And if you do not support Joe Biden, you should want that revealed too. And I shared on this program how it's amazing how the nomenclature changed almost on a moment's notice. And by now, this isn't novel information. I shared with you yesterday how on that World Economic Forum panel discussion that John Kerry was on, that audio I shared with you yesterday, which if you haven't, I'd encourage you to share yesterday's show with your friends as well as those who may disagree with you when we're describing things that are happening on the national scene. But Ben Smith from the New York Times, he almost was pounding his chest, after slam dunking the ball, and saying, hey, we witnessed in the 2020 election cycle the transition from the media from being a reporter of information, and let me just tell you, it started way before 2020, but this is what he said, from being a reporter of information to where we're shaping the national agendas. We're shaping the national agenda. Who knew that's what... Let's limit it to the New York Times, who Ben Smith works for. Who knew? Of course, a lot of you did know, that the New York Times saw itself as shaping the national agenda. I didn't know that's what the First Amendment protection afforded to the press was for. Maybe I'm wrong. But in saying all of that, I've simply said, and I've noticed that the nomenclature changed, which I provided a demonstration of that right here on this program with George Stephanopoulos, because the early cries were, there's no evidence of fraud. And I said then, and I'll say again, it's important that we distinguish fraud in terms of votes being switched from violation of election laws, from voting irregularities, because those are not all the same thing. They're under the umbrella, but they're not all identical. That makes sense. And I've shared this with you guys before, but having practiced trial law in the criminal context for as long as I did, prosecuting cases when defense attorneys knew that the law did not favor them and the facts did not favor them, what they sought to do in an effort to confuse the jury is to muddy the waters, to try to make the issue as complex, as complicated, and as unclear as possible, which required me to make sure I presented my cases with clarity so that a jury could arrive at a unanimous verdict. And what I am telling you, there are nefarious actors in our country right now because they have a vested interest, and I'm just calling it like it is, Joe Biden being the 46th president of the United States. They are remarkably incurious and unwilling to provide clarity on these conversations. That's why you have things like, oh, all President Trump's lawsuits are being thrown out. But they're not telling you that President Trump's campaign legal team has only filed a few lawsuits. You have other people, private citizens, you have state legislative officials who file their own lawsuits. But you have many in Goebbels Inc. who are lumping all of them together as if they're all the same thing coming from the same sources, which is simply not the case. Getting back to what I'm endeavoring to explain, my concerns are much broader than Trump v. Biden. Regardless of where you stand on the political aisle, so to speak, stop and consider the possibility that elections in America may no longer be free and fair elections. Stop and consider. I shared before, you only get to vote for socialism one time. You wondered how Venezuela became Venezuela? Folks, you're witnessing some of it now. And listen, I want to tell you, I hope, I don't want our system to be utterly corrupted, but if there's any evidence, don't you think we should investigate it? And so getting back to the change in nomenclature, earlier on, there's no evidence of voter fraud. That was the cry. Then, what was the cry? There's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. There's no evidence of systemic voter fraud. It's not enough of it. And I say, so you are willing to acknowledge that there is some fraud. But while acknowledging that there's some fraud, you don't want to find out just how deep the rabbit hole goes? I mean, if you're going to acknowledge that there's some fraud, why not find out exactly how much there is? If you're interested in protecting the franchise that is voting, I mean, these are some of the same people that tell me all day long that Republicans are involved in suppressing the vote. Right? But now all of a sudden they're not interested in finding out whether or not the vote is being tinkered with. Now, let me get to some of the substance of what I want to share today. It's amazing the things that happened just today. These things happened today. So first, I want to get to the Attorney General, William Barr, announced in an interview with the Associated Press today, and I'll just read his quote. Quote, "To date," is what he said, "we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election," end quote. Sounds like there's fraud, but not widespread enough. And he said to date. Now, one thing I definitely want to make sure you're aware of, because I think some people are taking it to try to make his statement mean more than what he is saying it means. In addition to that statement, the Attorney General also said, quote, "There's a growing tendency to use the criminal justice system as a sort of default fix-all. And people don't like something, they want the Department of Justice to come in and investigate," end quote. So, and then the Trump legal team issued a statement in response to William Barr. Then I'll get to something else. I agree with that latter part of what William Barr said. We have to resist this temptation to want to resolve everything with a Department of Justice criminal justice investigation, because that's not always the remedy. Like I said, some of the election irregularities, some of the violations of election laws, the remedies are civil in nature and not criminal. Now, that gets into legal nuance. But again, if we had a media that was invested in helping the American people understand and navigate these issues, you wouldn't have to wait until 5 p.m. Central to have me explain to you that some of the remedies that people are pursuing, because different states have different laws, are civil in nature, which means that they have to assert a civil legal challenge, which is happening. There are others that are criminal in nature that will need to be vetted in a criminal sense. All right, that being said, President Trump's legal team issued a press statement in response to the announcement by Attorney General William Barr, wherein it reads, quote, with all due respect to the Attorney General, there hasn't been any semblance of a Department of Justice investigation. We have gathered ample evidence of illegal voting in at least 6 states, which they have not examined. Now, I'm going to pause. That is not a specious claim. That is a factual assertion that can be proven or disproven. Mr. Attorney General, have you examined any of the witnesses and the evidence presented by the Trump legal team in these 6 states? And I just want to explain this for you. If Goebbels Inc., which, by the way, if you don't know, that comes from Adolf Hitler's minister of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, Goebbels. All right, Joseph Goebbels. If they were interested in conducting their role as the fourth estate, which has been afforded First Amendment protection, they would simply say that. Mr. Barr, the Associated Press, could go right back to him, because that's who he gave the interview to, and say, Mr. Barr, the Trump team has said that the Department of Justice has not examined any of the witnesses or the evidence that they have filed in several states. Is that true? Folks, that's not hard. That's not hard to do. That is, if you're interested in the truth. Let me go on. I'm going to start again with the Trump team's response. Quote, with all due respect to the Attorney General, there hasn't been any semblance of Department of Justice investigation. We have gathered ample evidence of illegal voting in at least 6 states, which they have not examined. We have many witnesses swearing under oath they saw crimes being committed in connection with fraud. As far as we know, not a single one has been interviewed by the DOJ. The Justice Department also hasn't audited any voting machines or used their subpoena powers to determine the truth. Pause. I'm going to get back to this statement. Now, that is significant. Now, why is that significant? Because the Department of Justice, unlike those who are prosecuting a case in a civil context, the Department of Justice has inherent subpoena power, which means that they can get the lawful authority to require certain evidence to evaluate. As a civil litigant, you don't automatically have that authority. So again, these are factual assertions that are being made that can easily be proven or disproven. I'll read the rest of the statement. Nonetheless, we will continue our pursuit of the truth through the judicial system and state legislatures, and continue toward the Constitution's mandate and ensuring that every legal vote is counted and every illegal vote is not. Again, with the greatest respect to the Attorney General, his opinion appears to be without any knowledge or investigation of the substantial irregularities and evidence of systemic fraud, end quote. Again, the role of Goebbels Inc. would be, if they were legitimate, to say, is any of this true, Mr. Barr? But you know they're not going to follow up with them, because why? They have the soundbite that they wanted. Even the Attorney General has said there's no evidence of fraud, which is not his total statement. Anyway, having said that, it's amazing that all this stuff happened today. Did you know today in Arlington, Virginia, there was a press conference where the Trump team presented 3 witnesses who provided live testimony. The testimony, which was reflected in sworn affidavits written under penalty of perjury, where these witnesses came forward to testify publicly as to what they witnessed firsthand. Now, this is the audio I gave in the introduction that you probably won't hear anywhere else, or maybe not very many other places. The first audio I want to play is from a young man by the name of Ethan Pease of Madison, Wisconsin. He, you'll hear, isn't a Biden supporter or a Trump supporter. He felt compelled because he witnessed funny business with our election systems. Ethan Pease worked as a subcontractor for the United States Postal Service in Madison, Wisconsin. Listen to what Ethan Pease testified to today. Clip number 2.
During the run-up to and on Election Day, I was working as a temporary hire at United Mailing Services, UMS, a USPS subcontractor in Wisconsin. I began employment on August 26, 2020 as a route driver and box truck driver. This meant my job was to pick up mail on a predetermined route and deliver it to UMS for sorting and metering. I would then take the sorted mail in my box truck to USPS. In September or October, I began to deliver mail-in ballots from UMS to USPS as part of my evening delivery duties. I knew this because there was special bins marked for ballots only. On one occasion...
Now, I want to make sure everybody's following along with this audio. Ethan Pease worked for United Mailing Services, all right, a subcontractor for the United States Postal Service, in which a part of his regular jobs, including him picking up what he knew to be ballots from locations that were marked for ballots. Continue.
I forgot to retrieve the ballots for transportation and had to go back for them. After that, I always made sure to check that I had the ballot bins loaded for transport. On November 2nd, 2020, I noticed that there was only one ballot in the bin for delivery to USPS. And on November 3rd, Election Day, there were no ballots in the bin for delivery. One can imagine my surprise then when the next day, November 4th, I was asked by a senior USPS employee named Monte if I had forgotten any ballots the night before. Monte explained that an order came down from the Wisconsin-Illinois chapter of USPS that 100,000 ballots were missing. Monte then told me that his post office had dispatched employees to look for the missing ballots around 4 a.m., and that only 7 or 8 were found at UMS. Based on my previous experience and habit of double-checking for ballots, I believe that to be a lie. The following day, November 5th, 2020, I had a conversation with a different USPS employee named Rachel, in which she admitted that USPS employees were ordered to backdate ballots that were received too late to be lawfully counted. I asked Rachel if I would get in trouble with my boss for those ballots the other night, referring to the allegedly missing ballots I discussed with USPS employee Monte on November 4th, 2020. No, you wouldn't, she responded, as long as they were postmarked for the 3rd. She continued, that's why they had us do that. I didn't bring any of this to the attention of my supervisors at USPS at the time due to what I perceived to be their hostility towards President Donald Trump and their evident contempt for the law. I heard those same 2 post office employees making jokes about taking mail-in ballots for Trump and throwing them away. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Biden supporter either. In fact, I didn't vote for either of the main candidates. But something profoundly wrong occurred in Wisconsin during the presidential election, and the American people have a right to know about it. During the run-up to and on
American Family Radio newscasts are now available as a podcast.
I'm Rusty Pugh. I'm Steve Jordahl.
Didn't catch the full story? Listen to the podcast.
I'm Chris Woodward.
I'm Chad Groening.
Didn't have the radio on at the top of the hour? Listen to the podcast.
I'm Charlie Bunch. And I'm Fred Jackson.
Get accurate news from a Christian perspective whenever you want it with the American Family News podcast. You can also sign up for our daily news brief. Visit onenewsnow.com.
I've been working on the railroad.
Brian Fisher leads the charge into America's culture war.
On my time away. Okay, I think we're good to go.
Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Yeah, that little impromptu concert, that's just a bonus for you.
Listen weekday afternoons at 1 Central. It's Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
No extra charge for that.
On American Family Radio.
A Pilgrim Mindset. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. This year is the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims' landing in modern-day Massachusetts. The Pilgrims left England for the New World to establish a community where they could pursue their faith without government interference. Their worldview to glorify God, abstain from sin, strive for holiness, and be subject to a limited government is summarized in the Apostle Peter's letter to the persecuted Christians of his time. I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Christian, we need that kind of pilgrim mindset. Hear more at thechristianworldview.org and then tune in this weekend for another topic that will sharpen your worldview.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes with news and commentary next. I need you to do something right now, folks. Text pound 250 with the keyword baby. We are in a crisis point in American history, and there is growing concern that the nation's abortion rate is about to explode. So I need your help right now to save the life of an unborn child. And that's why I'm partnering with Preborn, an organization equipping pregnancy centers with ultrasound machines. 80% of women who have an ultrasound save their child. So get on your phone right now, text pound 250 with the keyword baby. Text pound 250 with the keyword baby. Parts of California are under a de facto state of martial law. China virus lockdowns in place, no indoor dining, gym shut down, curfews in place. Very sad. But this is life under Democrat rule. Sheila Kuhl is a member of the L.A. County Board of Supervisors. She said it's simply too dangerous to eat inside or outside. Well, just hours after casting a vote to ban all outdoor dining, Supervisor Kuhl was spotted eating at a fancy Italian restaurant. Outdoors. Not very cool, but not surprising for Democrat lawmakers. Governor Gavin Newsom was caught feasting at a fancy restaurant in wine country. CNN anchor Chris Cuomo got caught trotting around the Hamptons without a face mask. And Denver Mayor Michael Hancock told citizens not to travel before flying cross-country to visit his family. It's a heaping helping of hypocrisy, ladies and gentlemen. Lockdowns for thee, but not for me. I'm Todd Starnes.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Now, I said before that I think one of the fundamental public relations errors that has occurred is that there has not been enough discussion of the constitutional challenges, for example, like in Pennsylvania, where a large part, or should I say a significant component of election concerns there include the Supreme Court's unilateral decision to change the election day. Simply put, the state legislature in Pennsylvania passed a law that allowed mail-in ballots for their election, but they expressly refused to extend the deadline for collection of those mail-in ballots beyond 8 p.m. on election day, November 3rd. Well, the state Supreme Court there explicitly said, we can collect them after November 3rd, even though the legislature said no. The Elections Clause of the U.S. Constitution explicitly confines the authority governing federal elections to state legislatures. That's a simple and direct communication. The same thing applies in Georgia. The Secretary of State and a private citizen by the name of Stacey Abrams cannot enter into an agreement to change federal election laws. You just can't do that. And so some would say, yeah, I know, but even if Pennsylvania is taken out of the mix and even if Georgia is taken out of the mix, that's still not enough votes to change. That's still not enough results to change the election. Well, what if Wisconsin is challenged? You know, I know the Attorney General said to date he hasn't found any evidence of, as he said, widespread election fraud. The Trump legal team shot back and said, you haven't evaluated any of our evidence, nor talked to any witnesses. If Goebbels Inc. was interested, Ethan Pease came out publicly. He named people as supervisors at the United States Postal Service. A basic investigation into the credibility of the testimony would simply say, did Ethan Pease work as a subcontractor for the U.S. Postal Service? Again, that's an objective fact that can be proven or disproven. Was there a supervisor named Monty? Proven or disproven. Was there somebody in a supervisor role named Rachel? Proven or disproven. The man literally said there were 100,000 ballots. Now remember, he was only in Madison, Wisconsin. He's not in the whole state. If only in Madison there were 100,000 ballots missing. And how did Monty know that they were missing? If you're interested, hey, Monty, Ethan Pease named you. Monty, how did you know they were missing? teeth and peas named Rachel. And Rachel said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. We can have ballots as long as we backdate them to November." What? In addition to that, today, the Trump legal team. Well, no, let me get this correct. Yes, the Trump legal team filed a brand new lawsuit in Wisconsin today. Among the allegations, because a state law in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin state legislature already had demonstrated an apprehension concerning mail-in votes. The state law in Wisconsin requires those who to submit their ballots by mail, they have to file a unique application requesting a mail-in ballot. Well, in Wisconsin, you have thousands, tens of thousands of ballots that were received by mail where they have not been able to find the application requesting the mail-in ballot. Is everybody okay with this? Their state law, this is not federal law. The Trump team didn't make this up. The Wisconsin state law says, hey, if you're going to mail it in, and this is one of the allegations, that the current lawsuit is challenging the legality of 220,000 ballots. The margin of Wisconsin was not very wide. So what I'm saying, no matter where you stand on the political spectrum, are you cool with this happening? Oh, yeah, we have tens of thousands of ballots that just came in the mail. Can you find the applications requesting those ballots? No. Even though the state election law requires it, details. There's more. There's another man, a truck driver by the name of Jesse Morgan. He's going to testify. He testified today. And listen, I'm going to play the audio so you can hear it and judge for yourself. He testified, man. He transported ballots from Bethpage, New York to Pennsylvania. Everybody's okay with this? There's a little prohibition. There's a little bit of prohibition between ballots being transported across state lines. Let you listen to him for yourself. Listen to Jesse Morgan explaining his experience with some funny peculiarities with him transporting ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. Clip number 1.
I drive tractor trailer for U.S. Postal Service, subcontractor. I drive a route transporting mail from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Bethpage, New York to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and back to Lancaster. On October 21st, when I arrived for my usual route in Bethpage, New York, an expediter made 3 references to ballots. In total, I saw 24 gaylords, or large cardboard containers of ballots loaded into my trailer. I then drove to Harrisburg with the ballots. Usually, I offload in one of the 7 docks every day, but not on October 21st. I wasn't on.
So why did things change on this particular day? That would be a legitimate question. Continue, please, Marty.
Allowed to offload. That's different. Whenever I pull into Harrisburg, I go around and I get my dock and I get unloaded and then I roll out. Not that day, all right? Not that day. A ticket is always provided to a driver when they arrive at a United States Postal Service facility that proves you were there. The transportation supervisor refused to give me a ticket and told me to leave. I then demanded he give me a late slip since I wanted to get paid for the time I was sitting there and waiting for them to offload me. He refused to give me that too. He was kind of rude and wouldn't explain anything to me. He just told me to go to Lancaster. I then drove to Lancaster, unhooked my trailer in its normal place, and then drove my truck to where I always park it in a nearby lot, and then I went home. The next day, it just got weirder. As I arrived at Lancaster's United States Postal Service facility with my tractor, I went to hook up to my trailer, and my trailer was gone. What happened on October 21st was a series of unusual events that cannot be a coincidence. I know I saw ballots with return addresses filled out, thousands of them, thousands, loaded onto my trailer in New York and headed for Pennsylvania. At first, I didn't think it was a big deal. In fact, I thought it was really awesome. I really did. I was like, sweet, I'm doing something for the presidential race. This is cool. But as things became weirder, I got to thinking and wondered why I was driving complete ballots from New York to Pennsylvania.
And again, we should just be all cool with this. Come on, man. Come on, man. This is absolutely remarkable that these things are happening. And again, and I said it before, there should all be a vested interest in the truth coming out. And again, if the media, if Goebbels Inc. had any interest in finding the truth, they could simply ask, hey, Attorney General Barr, did you talk to Jesse Morgan? Was he interviewed in the process of determining the presence or the lack thereof of fraud and irregularities, violations of local election laws? Those are simple questions to be presented. Some have raised the issue as to the veracity of the lawsuit filed today in Wisconsin, because it followed the recount in Wisconsin. The litigation there is being headed up by a man by the name of Jim Troupis, who's a former circuit court judge in the state of Wisconsin, where he literally said, quote, exposing exactly how the election processes were abused in Wisconsin holds enormous value for this election and beyond a victory for President Trump. You heard that? I'm going to read it again. Exposing exactly how the election processes were abused in Wisconsin holds enormous value for this election beyond a victory for President Trump. But the fact is, we're demonstrating that the results of this election unequivocally ought to be questioned. And what I'm driving at, and I hope you can hear through what I'm saying, because I understand there's some people who have a sycophantic relationship with President Donald Trump. I'm saying this is much broader than the person Donald Trump. This is much broader. And then someone say, oh, Abraham, there's been fraud for years. I'm saying, okay, are you okay with fraud continuing for additional years? I'm like, come on. And it just reveals, one, the great depths to which some of us that, we adhere to. As long as our guy gets in, we're all cool with it. But if it's not our guy, then you're upset. And this is mind-boggling to me. So we have all of these entities noticing Goebbels Inc. switch their nomenclature from no evidence to not widespread. And then they're just going to say, okay, it's not widespread. We have those who formally fancy themselves investigative journalists that are simply saying, it's not widespread, it's not widespread, it's not widespread, it's not widespread. And the simple reality is the way that cases are presented is you go wherever the evidence leads you. You don't start with your conclusion. This is not like a science experiment. You don't start with your conclusion to try to prove your hypothesis. You follow the evidence. And then if you conclude that the evidence is not widespread, if you have any interest in heartening the American people and being able to trust our election results, you reveal the results of your investigation to the American people. Exactly how many dead people voted in Philadelphia. Exactly how many people in Wisconsin for which they have mail-in ballots but they do not have the unique applications requesting those ballots on file there. How many of those are there? Ethan P. said he talked to Monty and to Rachel. Monty magically knew that 100,000 ballots are missing. Ethan says, man, I check these boxes all the time. I don't think that's correct. Ethan says Rachel told him, no big deal. As long as we get the November 3rd date put on them, everything will be cool. Like, you're working for the U.S. Postal Service, and you are notified that 100,000 ballots are missing, and you're not going to get in trouble for that? Am I going to get in trouble for this? Don't worry about it. We'll find them as long as we get November 3rd on them. Guys, come on. Come on. And do I even need to revisit all of the former investigations? Do I need to remind you of NBC's investigation into the Dominion voting systems from 2017? Do I need to remind you as to how many of them objected to them? And so why the lack of curiosity now? Do I need to remind you of the December 6, 2019 letter from Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar to the heads of Dominion saying, we think your voting machines resulted in votes being switched from the candidate we support to his opponent? And no one wants to ask any of these questions? It's a strange lack of curiosity. A strange lack of curiosity. Let's move on. Why you want to move on so fast? I think I may know the answer, but I could be wrong. And that's all a part of the reason why we should want to get down to the bottom of it. That's just the bottom line. And if you won the thing fair and square, you don't have any problem with people determining whether or not it was fair and square. When you got the touchdown pass and you know you got it across the goal line and hit the pylon before you went out of bounds, you don't have any problem with instant replay. But you know who don't want instant replay to show? The ones who know, you stepped on the line before you tried to cross the finish line.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith,